Good day, Craig here from Arms and Armor. Today we're going to talk about our 15th century two-hander. It's a large sword. It's interesting because it's an early version of two-handers. In the proportions of the sword, you can kind of see that it still looks very much like the long sword and even the single-handed sword of the day proportion-wise, but in actuality, size-wise, you can see it's quite large. This is from the mid-1400s. We have some references to two-handed swords in English inventories and such that are as early as 1400 or so. And in 1510, there's even a description of Henry VIII at tournament using the two-handed sword with valor and elegance to a point that no one wanted to face him because he struck so hard. Swords like this are very interesting in the sense that they just are kind of blown up smaller swords. You don't see the real long grips that you start getting with some of the two-handers that follow in the development. And you can see that the guard and the pommel are very much of a type that you could find on single-handed swords or on long swords as well. Ewart Oakeshott suggests that these kind of swords kind of form a group of English-specific swords that may be identifiable. There are three examples. This is in the Wallace collection that we have based ours on. There's also one in the Royal Armories that is said to come from the Castillon battle, the last battle of the 100 Years' War. It is associated with that. It is of similar form. And then there's one in the Museum of London that came out of the Thames. They all have kind of a fishtail style pommel. This one is rounded here where the other two have more of a point on the edges, but they all have kind of similar guards. One of the other ones has the escutcheon that comes down here. So they're very similar in nature. Large swords like this, while heavy, you can move them around them very adeptly. They do have some heft to them. This is really for a combat against an opponent in armor. You can see the sword, the hands do have some space in between them. It is not a long sword. This is a two-handed sword. The weight is up above 5 pounds, so it is a pretty impressive sword. And in the hand, the length overall is probably about 59, maybe a little bit more inches long. And the blade length is just a hair over 46 inches. So it certainly has real presence in the combat and a fight. You can reach out and touch someone pretty significantly with a sword like this. This particular sword is done, as we say, based on the Wallace collection sword. The original is in that collection and has a string-wrapped grip that is shellacked over, but that is probably an 18th century restoration kind of element and not proof, as it's sometimes claimed, that they string wrapped their grips for these types of swords. So it's an impressive sword in the hand. You can see that while the pommel and the guard are nicely shaped and such, they're pretty minimal. It is designed as really a sword of war in that kind of a context. So if you are interested in more information on this, there's an excellent article in the Park Lane Arms Fair that kind of extrapolates out on Ewart's theory by Neil Melville. And that would be a good place to check for more information. And if you're interested in a large two-handed early sword from the 15th century, this piece from about 1460 or so would be an excellent example to get for your collection.